Okay, that first one was easy. This one's 2 pages of questions. It'll go quick. You'll have 1.5 minutes until the last question, and then you'll have 2.5 minutes on that question. First question, what education or experience has prepared you to be New Mexico Attorney General?
Well, I think the first level of experience is I've really lived New Mexico's life story. I grew up in a humble community in Wagon Mound where 2 gas stations, a couple jobs, a public school, and a state agency highway department were all what we had in Wagon Mound to survive in our economy. And yet I'm proud because my grandfather and my mother didn't raise me to be poor, even though we were poor, because I was grateful to be in New Mexico. I really think that life story and that educational experience is really what has allowed me to go out and work hard and get an education at New Mexico Highlands University and at our, what I call Harvard on the Rio Grande, our UNM Law School here in New Mexico. And ultimately, the reason I combine those 2 life experiences is that ultimately every decision that I make, whether it's battling some of the greatest risks in corruption or thinking about New Mexico families, I always govern from the lens of a Wagon Mound small town kid. And if I have to decide environmental decisions, if I have to decide how to strengthen this economy, but ultimately if I have to decide that we have to allocate resources to go into some of the most corrupt and high-risk situations to protect our New Mexico families, I really believe that life experience and that academic education is what has allowed me to succeed at the auditor's office, where we've done more with less than anyone in government fighting public corruption in New Mexico.
Thank you. A state's attorney general often sets the tone for how corruption is viewed. For example, if an AG fails to file or prosecute a case in a timely manner, it can be dismissed and can give the impression that the state is corrupt or does not care about corruption. Do you agree or disagree with this statement, and why?
I absolutely agree. In fact, corruption is one of the crimes that just doesn't victimize the immediate people they're hurting. It victimizes communities, and it undermines all of what every New Mexican is trying to build, which is a better New Mexico, a better way of life. And one of the things that frustrates me is that a lot of elected officials truly don't understand what corruption is. We're all very frustrated when we see it on the news. But if Larry Barker's on television reporting the corruption, New Mexico has already failed. I've been advocating for 8 years to take a different approach, and that we have an obligation just to go after the bad actor, but also we have an obligation to minimize the risks that create the opportunity for corruption. So we have to absolutely, as an attorney general, go after the bad actor immediately, but we also have to go after politicians and bureaucracies that have been opening the barn door, so to speak, and allowing this corruption to exist for many, many years. Right now, the state can't balance its checkbook, and nobody in government's having a serious question on why there's lacking in accountability. The lacking of accountability allows bad actors to go out like a bad actor on a playground and violate our communities. And I want to make sure that we go after the bad actors, but that we really hold government accountable so that they can pull their own weight in minimizing corruption.
Thank you. This question is actually different. We call it the lightning round. There are 4 parts, and the candidate will have 30 seconds to answer each one. Sometimes politicians take a pass rather than taking a stand on controversial issues because they fear repercussions at the ballot box. Realizing that the AG's job is enforcement of laws, not making them, please use 30 seconds or less and tell us your position on the following issues. Legalizing marijuana.
You know, I think it's a debate that's at our doorstep. I voted for medical marijuana. I do think we have to go it slow. There are a lot of regulatory issues, whether you're against marijuana, which is we're losing the war on drugs. We are dealing with cartels right now where we need to make sure that tax dollars are being utilized in a very fair way, but also we need to be careful that we don't just open the floodgates and legalize marijuana when we can't even get taxpayers to properly pay their taxes. So Colorado's already experiencing a lack of accountability in those systems, and we just need to be careful. But I tend to be someone who wants to decriminalize some of the use of marijuana and not put these guys in prison, but we need to be very careful with that topic.
Thank you. Driver's licenses for illegal immigrants.
You know, I've not been in the legislature, so I've not had to vote on whether or not to repeal driver's licenses. I'm very concerned at this point that law enforcement resources go to public safety and making sure that they're enforcing crimes that are on the books. And the federal government needs to do a better job at immigration reform and immigration enforcement. But whatever the law is in terms of the legislature, I as Attorney General will uphold the rule of law, whatever in their infinite wisdom they decide on driver's licenses.
Thank you. Voter ID.
Voter ID, in terms of the presenting an ID
Yes,
to vote?
presenting an ID to vote.
Okay, so I'm not as well versed. Voter ID, I generally don't think that you need to present an ID to vote. The inference should be that most Americans that are honest need to be allowed to vote, and it shouldn't be burdensome. But we do have to be careful and make sure that there's strict accountability and other security measures so that we can minimize abuse in that area.
Thank you. The next question. There are issues that come up where federal agencies such as the Bureau of Land Management and the Environmental Protection Agency take action that may be against what is best for New Mexicans. There are cases where the New Mexico Attorney General could take action to protect New Mexicans, such as closing down half of the San Juan generating plant, but no action has been taken. What will your position be as the New Mexico Attorney General regarding similar issues?
Well, I think that there's what's called the New Mexico State's Interest Doctrine, and one of the things that I tell all folks, depending on whatever your ideology is that I'm going to appoint, for the first Attorney General in the history, to appoint a Solicitor General so that we can go on offense with all our litigation. Right now we are in a defensive mode when it comes to all our threats, whether they're state or federal threats when it comes to litigation. We need a Solicitor General to go on offense. Texas setting aside $100 million for water litigation, and yet we have no response proportional to that threat. It should be a very big business risk. So yes, I have no problem going after federal agencies. Right now, the reservations have very little federal law enforcement resources, and that crime is spilling into some of our other communities. We should have an Attorney General that's willing to step up and take on some of those federal agencies when they're contrary to the state's interest.
Thank you. In an Albuquerque Journal Q&A, you recently said, quote, "I believe that the Attorney General has to have the independence and proven experience to fight abuse and corruption. He or she can't be in the pocket of big business or political leaders. Given the fact that many political leaders and businesses have contributed to your campaign, please explain how you deal with contributors if elected."
Well, I love contributors. However, there has to be a very transparent methodology in the way I'm going to govern. And I think I'm one of the rare elected officials that both Republicans, Independents, and Democrats know where I stand. I'm going to fight hard and minimize the risk of corruption. I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat. But more importantly, I think the Attorney General also has to go after crimes that are undermining the economy. When is the last time you've ever had an Attorney General that says, I'm going to focus on fighting crimes that also hurt small businesses? There are tax cheats. The GAO just recently talked about tax fraud being one of the biggest threats to small economies like New Mexico, and yet I've heard no elected official go on the offense. I think that's where the Attorney General can use data, which businesses are going to know that I'm predictable, and that they're not going to know that I have a methodology that's based on risk. So I'm not going to go and use those resources until I meet with the business community and many other leaders, and we decide together what the largest threats are to our economy, to our public education system, and more importantly, the New Mexico family. I learned that in auditing, and auditing is not something that is partisan. But too many times, looking under the hood of government, we've been a leaky machine for a long time. And I think that's why we're getting massive support from the business community, because they just want someone who's going to focus on accountability, rule of law, and is willing to do it without any budget increase, which is what I would promise.
Thank you. This question, you have 2.5 minutes. Please tell the hiring committee why you believe you are the best candidate for the position of New Mexico Attorney General.
It's 3 things, very simple. 1, I'm the most connected to all the communities in New Mexico. I already know where Vaughn is, I know where Wagon Mountain is, I know where Deming is. Number 2, I have a proven track record of being a watchdog, which until the Attorney General starts being a better oversight agency, we're truly not going to have just legal results. They just don't happen. You have to have a real track record of using and maximizing every tax dollar efficiently and trying to stretch in the biggest community. And 3, no one has a stronger independent record. I've worked with the governor on Sunland Park. New Mexico Finance Authority was riddled with all Republican board members in a fiscal crisis, and the #1 priority was to secure the state's credit rating. However, I've also had to work with Democrats across the aisle on some of the corruption cases. Bernalillo County is a good example where you all pay property taxes, and it was me that went in to Bernalillo County, regardless of party, to try to stabilize where those investments were. So from Sunland Park to Jemez Mountain Schools to recently some of the issues that you've been reading where county managers are buying assault rifles with your tax dollars. We have a colorful independent record, and that's because we work with Republicans and Democrats to minimize corruption. And I don't care what party you're in, the facts are the facts, and we've become the #1 source of law for FBI, local law enforcement leaders, and that's the greatest honor that I get when I have a citizen or a law enforcement agency tell us to come in and give us an independent opinion, a factual opinion, and making sure that it's a very accurate opinion. And I work with Matt Chandler on some of his prosecution cases. We really have a great track record that I'm really proud of. And what I'll leave you with in closing is, no one knew what the auditor did 8 years ago, and no one knew who the state auditor was, and I built that record with Republicans, Independents, and Democrats that you can be proud of, that New Mexico does have a chance in fighting corruption.
Thank you. Ladies and
Thank you
gentlemen, Hector Balderas.